The Syntax of Things by Arisha. Chapter 67. Parentheses. The Sword.
No, Severus, the sword. Do not forget that it must be taken under conditions of need and valor, and he must not know that you give it. If Voldemort should read Harry's mind and see you acting for him,
I know, Severus got him. He approached Dumbledore's portrait and pulled it aside. The sword of Gryffindor was there, cold and heavy. He held it in his hands, and for a moment he feared it'd burn him. He'd deserve it. Phineas watched carefully from his own portrait. Severus considered turning the sword to himself and ending it all. Pointless thoughts. Sacrifices were foolish, and for once the boy wasn't. None of the portraits interrupted his silent hesitations. None of them needed to. And you still aren't going to tell me why it's so important to give Harry the sword?
No, I don't think so,
said Dumbledore.
He will know what to do with it. And be careful, Severus.
Don't worry, Dumbledore, he said coolly. I have a plan.
The blood traitor has left them, Phineas's portrait interrupted. Good for him, good.
Severus tensed at the words. He gripped the sword tighter, turned to Dumbledore.
Weasley. Yes. Young Weasley will find his way back.
How? Severus asked as he pulled on his traveling cloak. The weight of responsibility inside his chest was suddenly cutting its way out. His heart pounded with familiar panic. How do you know? How do you even know if any of this is going to work? Dumbledore smiled.
Look again behind my portrait.
He should have seen this coming. He should have known better than not have a plan of his own. At the far end of the hidden cabinet, there was a strange silver device that resembled a lighter. Severus picked it up.
What you're holding in your hand is a very powerful item. I have designed only two, and I dare say they are quite extraordinary.
What does it do?
Its twin is quite harmless, removes and restores light mostly. This one can turn its twin into a portkey with a click.
Severus listened carefully.
Flick it, and it will immediately transfer the owner of its twin to you. Do you understand?
Harry.
No, not Harry. But if Harry finds himself in danger tonight, I want you to use it and then disappear.
Weasley, then.
Severus, please.
For a moment, Severus feared he wouldn't do it. Then when he lowered his eyes to the sword. You expect me to follow all these orders without a hint of honesty? Phineas laughed.
Headmaster, now, you should know better than that. You shouldn't be wasting your time with these kids.
We appreciate your concerns, Phineas,
Dumbledore said.
Harry's friends are loyal to him,
he continued, looking at Severus.
Harry must not see you tonight.
I'll take care of it. Later that night, Severus did as he was told. Amongst the tall trees of the forest, he saw Harry, and his heart jumped in pain. He'd missed him. Oh, how he'd missed him. Forgive me, he thought, but he remained hidden.
Just look at that sky. Just look at the sky,
Harry said. Severus did. The dark mark was hovering there above their heads between thick clouds of smoke.
It's dangerous here, Severus told him. Go.
Harry laughed.
Do you ever have fun? Do you? Ever?
Severus jumped up panting and grabbed his wand before he realized he had been dreaming. He let it fall on the duvet and covered his face with a hand. Outside his chambers, someone was crying in pain. It must have been what woke him up. He threw on his robe hurriedly and ran to the door, only to find a wounded first-year trembling in fear. The little boy was clutching his own hand tightly, looking lost in the endless corridors of the dungeons. And, of course, he was a Gryffindor. The joy never ends. What happened? The kid shook his head. I was just heading towards Sir Headmaster. Severus pointed at the bloodied fingers. Who did this to you? Silence. Tears. Do you know how to find your way to the infirmary? No. Wait for me here. As he dressed himself, Severus thought of the looks he'd get, bringing yet another hurt child to the hospital wing in the middle of the night. He hadn't signed up for this. Hogwarts was out of his control. And there was nothing he could do. Harry did not expect Hermione to still have that book, and he was surprised when he saw her reading it.
It's pure rubbish,
he'd told her at the beginning, but for some reason she was determined to read all of it. In times of despair, even Skeeter's twisted assumptions were a distraction. Albus Dumbledore, of course, was always the weakest of the two, Hermione read. His ostensible brilliance failed to compete with Gellert Grindelwald's, and the friendship in question ended mysteriously just in time for Dumbledore to rise in power. History claims that Dumbledore was the noble one, the one who meant no harm. But history is always narrated by the winner, and the other side of the story still remains unknown.
Harry rolled on his back and stared at her incredulously. She sat straighter on her seat and returned the book.
I know, she makes him look evil.
No, Harry said. She makes him look dumb. If Dumbledore wanted to harm people, he'd have done so, like years ago. You think it's true that? Ron asked. That he lied about what really happened. They were friends. How come he killed him with no remorse at all?
Harry shrugged.
We won't find out from Skeeter, Ron. Oh, then, Dumbledore? I mean, we could. Ron snorted. God, his portrait is probably there. You think Snape tossed it out? I hope, Harry said. Better sitting in the trash bin than having to look at what became of Hogwarts.
More than ever, he wished he could talk to Dumbledore, tell him about the appearance of the mysterious doe, the recovery of Gryffindor's sword, and above all, Ron's return. He missed the advice, the reassurance. He missed the advice and the reassurance of someone else too, but that didn't matter. It was pointless. Fake. It had never been real. Sometimes Harry suspected it was him who'd pushed Snape over the edge. What they'd done. It could have been what made Snape finally turn disgusted by Harry by that night, by the morning after. Maybe he wanted revenge. Or maybe he had to do something so drastic so he'd never have to be near Harry again. So Harry would never want to be near him again. Or maybe Voldemort promised him the world. What had he given him in exchange for such an incomparable gift, Hogwarts itself? It gets worse, Hermione warned. In 1945, just before the tragic events surrounding the death of Grindelwald... I can't believe she calls this duel tragic. One of the most...
Go on, we know she's horrible,
Ron said. In 1943, she repeated, 14 Muggle murders were reported in East Nuremberg. After Grindelwald's death, he was blamed for them all. Unsurprisingly, it was Dumbledore's convenient testimony that helped the system of justice close the case. One could assume by testifying he helped himself too.
What is that? Ron asked. She's saying Dumbledore was killing Muggles and blamed it on Grindelwald later on, explained Harry.
Since Grindelwald wasn't alive anymore to claim otherwise, Hermione added, it can't be true. It's outrageous. Ridiculous.
Reasonable,
Harry added.
What? We can't know for sure, can we?
Hermione's expression changed. You can't believe Dumbledore would do this.
No. Yes. I don't know what to believe anymore, actually.
You think he killed people?
Asked Hermione. Harry didn't respond. Dumbledore had certainly killed people. Harry wasn't sure if anyone deserved to die, even in times of war. We know he did. Have you found anything that's actually important? Ron asked instead.
Hermione shook her head. Rumors mostly, but they add to his profile like missing puzzle pieces. It's not like she proves anything, but she does provide some pretty debatable evidence. Oh, and... well, she does imply some other stuff as well, but that's just about him and Grindelwald. That they were romantically involved.
Skeeter is twisted, Harry spat. I don't get how they allowed her to publish this. Someone should sue her. It took a moment for realization to kick in, and for Harry to be reminded that they were in the middle of a war. Suing someone over rumors was hardly a priority. They laughed. Their laughter filled the room like the warmth of a sunny day.